After 7 days in the hospital with a relentless fever, my doctor stopped me in the discharge hallway and said, "You can't go home alone. Can your family pick you up?" I called my son. He sighed. "We're busy. Take an Uber." Then my daughter-in-law said loudly, "We already discussed this." I only replied, "Don't worry. I'll manage." That evening, I appeared on national news, and what they saw made both of them drop their phones. Thank you for being here with me today. Before we begin, I'd like you to drop a quick comment. Have you ever had someone close to you betray your trust? Just a simple yes or no. Your voice truly matters in this space. Quick note, some details in this story are fictionalized to emphasize the lesson. What's most important is the message it carries. I stood alone in the hospital hallway, holding discharge papers. I couldn't use my phone, showing 8% battery and one missed call I would never return. My name is Philip Kelly. I'm 68 years old, a retired bridge safety inspection engineer who spent 42 years making sure structures wouldn't fail when people needed them most. 7 days earlier, I had checked myself into Temple University Hospital in Philadelphia with a fever that wouldn't break. 7 days of IV fluids blood tests and the kind of weakness that makes you understand mortality in ways you never wanted to. Dr. Winslow Shelton, my attending physician, who looked about 52, signed my discharge papers with the kind of careful penmanship that made you trust his prescriptions. He set down his pen and looked at me with the expression doctors reserve for patients who are about to do something inadvisable. "Mr. Kelly," he said, "you cannot go home alone after 7 days with that fever. Do you have family who can pick you up?" I nodded. I had family. I pulled out my phone and dialed my son. Grant Kelly is 40 years old, owner of an engineering consulting firm he built from the ground up. He answered on the third ring with the impatient tone of someone interrupted during something important. "Dad," he said, not quite a greeting. "What's up?" "They're discharging me," I told him. "The doctor says I shouldn't go home alone. Could you?" Dad, we're entertaining clients." His voice had that edge I'd been hearing more and more over the past year, the one that said I was becoming an inconvenience. "You'll have to take an Uber." Behind him, I heard another voice. My daughter-in-law, Nell, 38, who had worked as communications director for a regional elder care facility chain before marrying my son. Her voice carried even through a phone speaker, sharp and controlled. "Is he calling again?" she said loud enough that she knew I would hear. We talked about this. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't Grant being too busy. This was a decision they had made together beforehand about what to do when I called, how to handle me, what level of involvement was acceptable. "Shite," I said quietly. "An Uber. I'll manage." Grant hung up without saying goodbye. I stood in that beige hospital hallway, with fluorescent lights humming overhead, and antiseptic smell clinging to everything holding papers that said I was medically cleared to leave but functionally too weak to open a jar. Dr. Shelton was watching me, and I could see in his eyes that he had heard enough of that phone call to understand what just happened. "Mr. Kelly," he began. "I'll be fine," I told him, because that's what you say when your family has decided you're a problem they've already discussed. You might ask why I didn't call my daughter. The truth is simpler than you'd think. I didn't have one. My wife Faye and I had only Grant. She passed 14 months ago, and with her went the last person in my family who returned phone calls without sighing first. I made my way to the hospital exit slowly, one hand on the wall, when the dizziness got bad. November in Philadelphia is cold, but the autumn light has a particular slant that makes yellow leaves glow against concrete. I found a stone bench near the front entrance and opened the Uber app with fingers that felt disconnected from my brain. 8% battery, 12-minute wait for the nearest driver. I sat down carefully the way you do, when you're not entirely sure your legs will cooperate if you need to stand up again. The bench was cold through my thin discharge day clothes. Traffic moved past on the street below the everyday sounds of a city that doesn't stop for one old man having a bad week. That's when I saw him. The pedestrian bridge crossed over 4 lanes of traffic near the river. A simple span I'd never inspected, but had walked across a dozen times on previous hospital visits. On the outer railing, facing away from the walkway, a young man stood with both feet on the narrow metal ledge. His hands gripped the railing behind him, and even from 60 feet away, I could see the tension in his shoulders. He was staring down at the traffic below. I watched him for 10 seconds, 20, 30, waiting for him to climb back over, waiting for him to be someone just taking a photo or doing something explainable. His knuckles were white. That detail would stay with me for weeks. He wasn't moving, just standing there on the wrong side of the railing with his back to the world, hands locked on metal, looking down at pavement and cars and a drop that would end any question he was asking himself. Later, I would learn his name was Marcel Marsh, 32 years old. Later, I would understand why he was standing there. But in that moment, I didn't know his name. I didn't know his story. I only knew 3 things with absolute certainty. 1, a man was about to jump. 2, no one else was looking. 3, I had seen him, and now I couldn't sit there and pretend I hadn't. My legs moved before my mind finished deciding. I stood up from that cold stone bench, my discharge papers sliding off my lap onto the ground, my phone still showing 8% battery, and a car that was now 10 minutes away. My body was weak. My family had just told me I was a problem they'd already discussed, but my legs moved anyway. I walked toward the bridge. Behind me, my papers scattered in the wind. Ahead of me, a stranger stood on a railing, seconds or minutes away from a choice he couldn't take back. And between us, only 60 feet of sidewalk, and the question of whether I had enough strength left to cross it. My phone buzzed. The Uber driver had canceled. I kept walking. The bridge was closer than I thought. Or maybe my sense of distance had broken along with everything else that morning. I didn't ask him why he was standing there. I just lowered myself onto the concrete steps 3 paces below him and said the only true thing I could think of. Moi andatio, I don't know what brought you here, I said quietly. But I just spent 7 days in that hospital behind us, and the last thing I want to do is watch someone fall. The wind moved between us, cold November air, carrying the smell of river water and car exhaust. Traffic hummed below on the 4 lanes he was staring at. He didn't turn around, didn't speak. His knuckles were still white on the railing. So I'm going to sit here, I continued. You don't have to talk. I just need to catch my breath anyway. That much was true. My legs were shaking. My vision kept blurring at the edges. But I had made it to the bridge, and now I was sitting 3 steps below a stranger who was deciding whether to die. And the only plan I had was to not leave. Silence stretched between us. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. I watched leaves skitter across the bridge deck. Heard a siren somewhere distant. Felt the cold seeping through my thin hospital discharge clothes. You should go, he said, finally, still not turning. His voice was younger than I expected. Tired. You look like you can barely stand. I can't, I admitted. Not yet. Why, because I saw you, I said simply. And now I can't unsee you. Another long silence. Then, you don't know me. No, I agreed. But I know what it looks like when someone is carrying more weight than they can hold. I've been carrying some of my own. I wasn't trying to trick him. Wasn't deploying some crisis negotiation technique I'd learned from television. I was just a 68-year-old man who had been rejected by his family that morning and was now sitting on cold concrete because walking away felt impossible. My wife Faye died 14 months ago. I said to the wind, to the traffic, to him. Some mornings I still reach across the bed before I remember she's not there. He didn't respond, but his shoulders shifted slightly. Still listening. The first 3 months I thought grief would kill me. I continued. Then I thought maybe I wanted it to. Then I just stopped thinking about it and focused on getting through each day without falling apart in the cereal aisle at the grocery store. A car honked below. Life kept moving indifferent to both of us. Everyone kept saying, "It gets better," he said quietly, still facing away. "Does it? It gets different," I told him. "Some days that's enough. Some days it isn't. Today I'm still here, so I guess today it was enough. Maybe you've never stood at that edge. Or maybe you have and you're wondering why I didn't just grab him and pull him back. Here's the truth, force doesn't save people. Presence does. We sat like that for a long time. I talked when words came. About Faye's laugh. About the empty house. About learning to cook for one person after 40 years of cooking for two. About how some mornings the hardest thing was just deciding to get out of bed, and how sometimes that small decision felt like the only victory that mattered. He listened. Eventually, he started asking questions. Small ones. How long were you married? What did she do? Did you have kids? Yes, I told him. One son. We weren't speaking much these days. Why not? He asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Somewhere along the way, I became an inconvenience instead of a father. Maybe that's what happens when you get old. You stop being a person people want around and start being a person people manage. He was quiet for a moment. Then, my mom used to call every Sunday. I stopped answering 6 months ago because I didn't want her to hear how bad things had gotten. Now I can't remember the last thing I said to her. You can call her today, I said gently. Right now if you want. I don't know what I'd say. Start with hello, I suggested. The rest will come. Another silence. Longer this time. I could feel my strength fading, the last reserves of energy draining out of my body like water through cupped hands. 7 days of fever. No food since hospital breakfast. A morning that had started with rejection and led to this bridge, this stranger, this moment. Then I heard movement. The scrape of shoes on metal. He was stepping down from the railing, slowly, carefully. He swung one leg back over, then the other, until he was standing on the walkway side of the bridge, facing me for the first time. He looked about 32 with dark circles under his eyes and the kind of exhaustion that went deeper than lack of sleep. Thank you, he said quietly. I tried to stand, tried to tell him he was welcome, tried to say something about how we'd both made it through today, and that was worth something. But the world tilted sideways. My vision turned white at the edges, then gray, then nothing. I felt myself falling the bridge deck, rushing up to meet my face, and somewhere in the distance I heard voices shouting. Strong hands caught my shoulder, breaking my fall. Someone was calling my name, except they didn't know my name, so they were just saying, "Hey, stay with me, can you hear me?" Across the street, I would learn later, a young television reporter named Elodie Lockwood, maybe 28, had been filming a traffic feature when her cameraman noticed the scene on the bridge. He'd swung the camera around and captured the entire sequence, an old man sitting on bridge steps, a younger man climbing down from a railing, and then the old man collapsing into the arms of the person he'd just saved. Are you getting this? Elodie's voice, sharp and professional even in crisis. Call 911, now. But I didn't hear that part. The last thing I felt before everything went black was his hand, strong, steady, catching my shoulder. The man I had just pulled back from the edge was now holding me up from falling, and somewhere behind us, a camera was recording every single second. I woke up 7 hours later in the same hospital I'd left that morning. But between the bridge and that moment, while I was unconscious in an ambulance, and then lying in an emergency room bed, The world kept moving without me. 7 hours after the bridge, my son's phone lit up during dessert with 4 words from a colleague: "Turn on the news. Now." Grant was entertaining clients at an upscale restaurant in Philadelphia, the kind with white tablecloths and candlelight and wine that costs more per glass than my weekly grocery budget. He'd been there since 6, schmoozing potential contracts, playing the successful businessman role he'd perfected over the past decade. He glanced at his phone, frowned, then excused himself from the table. Pulled up the local news feed. The headline caught him first: "Retired engineer saves stranger collapses on bridge." Then he saw the video. The footage was shaky but clear enough. An old man sitting on bridge steps. A younger man standing on a railing, then climbing down. The old man rising, swaying, falling. The younger man lunging forward to catch him before he hit concrete. The news anchor's voice played over the clip. Retired bridge inspection engineer Philip Kelly saved a stranger this morning before collapsing on a pedestrian bridge over the Schuylkill River. Both men were transported to Temple University Hospital in stable condition. The identity of the second man has not been released, but witnesses say Kelly talked him down from the railing in what police are calling an act of extraordinary compassion. Grant's hand trembled, holding his phone. I learned this later from the conversation we would have, the one where I asked him directly why it took 7 hours for him to call, and he admitted he'd been frozen, unsure whether to come to the hospital or stay with his clients. His business partners noticed, asked if everything was okay. He showed them the screen, said something about his father being in an accident, and watched their faces shift from professional interest to polite concern. Nell was sitting beside him when he turned the phone toward her. She looked at the screen. Her expression didn't change that practiced composure she wore like armor, but her eyes went to the second figure in the video, the younger man who'd caught me as I fell. "The man he saved," she said quietly, leaning closer. "Do you recognize him?" Grant squinted at the grainy footage, shook his head. Nell's voice dropped even lower, controlled and precise. "That's Marcel Marsh. I didn't know that name yet." Didn't understand why her face had gone pale beneath her makeup, or why she stood abruptly from the table and excused herself to make a phone call. Grant told me later that she was gone for 15 minutes, and when she returned, her smile was back in place, but her hands were shaking. It was only later that I understood why she didn't cry that night. She wasn't afraid for me. She was terrified because of the man I had pulled down from that bridge. But while my son was sitting in a restaurant, trying to decide whether to come to the hospital or finish his business dinner, I was lying unconscious in an emergency room bed, unaware that I had just saved the one person who could destroy my family. Have you ever woken up in the same place you left hours earlier and wondered if time moved backward? That's what it felt like opening my eyes in that hospital room. The ceiling was familiar. The fluorescent lights were the same ones I'd stared at for 7 days. Even the smell was identical: antiseptic and recycled air and the faint chemical tang of floor cleaner. For a confused moment, I thought the bridge had been a dream, that I'd never left that Grant's phone call, and the cold bench and the man on the railing had all been fever hallucinations. Then Dr. Shelton appeared in my field of vision, and his expression told me everything was real. "So, Mr. Kelly," he said, checking the monitor beside my bed, "your body simply gave out. 7 days of high fever discharge against medical advice, significant physical and emotional exertion. You're lucky you didn't have a heart event. How long was I out?" My voice came out rough, dry. "Yeah, about 6 hours. We've rehydrated you, run a full panel. You'll need to stay overnight for observation, possibly longer." I nodded slowly, testing my limbs. Everything ached, but I was alive. Conscious. "The man from the bridge," I said. "Is he—" "I'm right here," a voice said from the corner. I turned my head slowly, because the room tilted when I moved too fast. Marcel Marsh sat in a plastic chair near the door, still wearing the same clothes from the bridge. His eyes had dark circles beneath them, and his hair was disheveled, but he was there. Alive. Real. I told them I wasn't leaving, he said quietly. They tried to make me wait outside in the family area, but I said I was the reason you were here. That seemed to carry some weight. You didn't have to stay, I said. Yes, I did. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. You caught me when I was falling. Then I caught you. I figured that means something. You caught me. I repeated the memory coming back in fragments. His hand on my shoulder, the world tilting. His voice saying, "Stay with me. If you hadn't—" I trailed off. Marcel shook his head. You're the reason I'm still here at all. I think that makes us even. Dr. Shelton glanced between us, his professional mask cracking slightly into something that might have been respect or sadness or both. I'll give you two some time, he said and left. The room fell quiet, except for the soft beeping of monitors and the distant sounds of the hospital beyond the door. Marcel stayed in his chair, hands clasped between his knees, looking like a man who'd been carrying something heavy for far too long. There's something you need to know, he said finally, about why I was on that bridge, and about your son's company. I didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. Your name, he continued, is on 14 safety compliance reports for elder care facilities across Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. Reports certifying structural integrity, fire safety systems, emergency protocols, all signed by Philip Kelly, licensed bridge safety inspection engineer. My stomach went cold. I don't do elder care facility inspections. I never have. My specialty was bridges, highways, large span infrastructure. I know, Marcel said quietly, because I'm the one who was told to forge your signature. The words hung between us for the rest of that night. Marcel left when nurses insisted visiting hours were over. I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to comprehend that my name, my professional reputation, built over 40 years, had been stolen. The next morning, my son walked into my hospital room with a bouquet of flowers and a television crew waiting in the hallway. Grant looked tired, his expensive suit rumpled. Behind him, Nell wore navy and the expression of someone arriving at a funeral appropriately somber, publicly distressed. Dad, Grant said, crossing to my bedside. Thank God you're okay. Nell moved in for a hug. Her perfume was floral and expensive. We've been so worried since we saw the news, she said. You could have been killed. Through the doorway, I could see camera lights. Elodie Lockwood was positioned with her crew waiting. The bridge rescue was still news, and my family had arrived with perfect timing for the morning broadcast. If you were so worried, I said calmly, why do hospital records show you explicitly refused to sign my discharge papers yesterday morning when Dr. Shelton said I couldn't go home alone? The room went still. Grant's face shifted confusion, then something that might have been shame. Nell's expression didn't change at all, which told me everything. She'd been the one to refuse. Grant had just done what she told him to. Elodie was in the doorway now, camera rolling. Excuse me, she said. Can someone from hospital administration confirm that did family refuse discharge assistance yesterday? The hospital administrator, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain, stepped forward from the nurse's station. She glanced at Nell, at Grant, at the cameras, then at me. I can pull the records if needed, she said carefully. But yes, next of kin's signature line shows refused, with a timestamp of 9:47 a.m. yesterday. Nell's face finally moved. Not shame, not embarrassment. Just cold calculation, like someone revising strategy mid-execution. Grant opened his mouth, closed it. Dad, we were clients, and we thought. You realized, I said quietly. Your wife told you we'd talked about this, which means you'd already decided what level of inconvenience I was worth. The cameras kept rolling. Elodie knew when to let silence do the talking. Nell recovered first, pivoting smoothly. We made a mistake. We should have come immediately. We're here now, and that's what matters. She took Grant's arm and guided him toward the door away from cameras. They left the flowers on the bedside table. White roses, expensive and impersonal. After they were gone, and the camera crew had moved on, Marcel returned. He'd been waiting down the hall, staying out of sight. You needed to say that, he said, settling into the corner chair. They needed to hear it on camera. I needed them to know I'm not confused, I replied. That I remember exactly what happened. Marcel nodded. Then he told me the rest. He'd been a forensic financial analyst at Grant's firm. 6 months ago, he discovered a pattern safety certification reports for elder care facilities across 3 counties, all bearing my signature, all filed through Grant's company. Except the facilities showed fire suppression systems that didn't work, staffing ratios that violated state law, structural issues flagged but never repaired, and my name on reports saying everything was compliant. When Marcel refused to sign off on the financial reconciliation, everything changed. Suddenly, there were irregularities in his expense reports, missing receipts. Within 2 weeks, he was accused of embezzling $47,000 and terminated for cause. His reputation destroyed, his certifications questioned, his savings gone to lawyers who couldn't prove what he knew. He'd been framed because he'd found something they couldn't let him expose. 40 years. I had spent 40 years making sure bridges wouldn't fail when people needed them. Someone had spent maybe 40 minutes forging my name to make sure they would. But I had copies, Marcel said quietly. Before they locked me out of the system, I downloaded files. Your signature on those reports. It's good, very good. But the pressure points are wrong, like someone traced it instead of signing it naturally. He leaned forward. I tried to reach you. Sent an email 2 months ago with everything I had. No response. I called your listed number disconnected. I even drove to your house once, but you weren't home. 2 months. He'd been trying to reach me for 2 months, while I lived my quiet, retired life, unaware my name was being used to cover up dangers that could kill people. That night alone in my hospital room, I opened my email for the first time since my admission. The spam folder had one message that made my blood run cold. Sender Marcel Marsh. Subject urgent regarding inspection reports and your professional certification. Date September 3rd, 2023. I opened it with shaking hands. The email was detailed, methodical. It outlined every facility, every forged report, every life at risk. It ended with a single line: your genuine signature on one authentic counter document will shatter everything they've built. Please contact me. Lives depend on it. Sent September 3rd, 2 months before that bridge. Have you ever wondered how different your life would be if you'd checked your spam folder one random Tuesday morning? I think about that every day. If I'd read this email 2 months ago, Marcel wouldn't have lost everything. Wouldn't have stood on that railing. Wouldn't have needed saving. Our lives had been intertwined long before I saw him on that bridge, connected by a forged signature and a spam filter that swallowed his cry for help into digital silence. I stared at that email until the screen dimmed. 2 months. Which meant everything that happened on that bridge, his desperation, my collapse, our meeting, existed because of technology and a name someone had stolen from me. And if they'd stolen my name, what else had they taken while I wasn't looking? Wednesday morning, I got my answer to that question. Dr. Shelton pulled up a chair beside my hospital bed, Without being asked, in 3 days of treatment, he'd never done that before. He set a folder on the rolling tray table and looked at me with the expression doctors wear when they're about to deliver news that changes everything. "Mr. Kelly," he said carefully, "your updated blood panels show something disturbing." I sat up straighter, ignoring the pull of the IV line still taped to my arm. The persistent fever, the weakness that wouldn't resolve. I ordered a comprehensive toxicology screen yesterday because nothing was adding up clinically. He opened the folder. Low-dose traces of an immunosuppressive compound. Not part of your prescription. Not part of any legitimate medical treatment. The room went very quiet. Just the steady beep of monitors and the distant sounds of the hospital beyond my door. "Someone administered this to you over an extended period," he continued. "Weeks, possibly months. The dosing pattern suggests deliberate calculation." "Enough to kill me?" I asked. "No." He met my eyes. "Just enough to keep you weak. To keep you bedridden when you might have needed to be somewhere else. The timing is what concerns me. The compound peaks in your system right before your 7-day admission. Almost as if someone wanted to ensure you'd be hospitalized during a specific window." I thought about the bridge, about Marcel's email sent 2 months ago, about 14 forged inspection reports and a competency hearing I'd learned was scheduled for late November. "I can file a police report immediately," Dr. Shelton said. "This is attempted assault, possibly attempted murder, depending on dosage and intent." I was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Not yet," I said finally. "If we move too early, whoever did this will know we're looking. They'll destroy evidence, create alibis, disappear. Mr. Kelly, Doctor, someone has been poisoning me to keep me away from something, which means whatever they're protecting is still vulnerable. The moment they know I know, that window closes." He studied my face, then nodded slowly. "I'm documenting everything. When you're ready to move, you'll have medical evidence." "Thank you," I said, "for seeing what others might have missed. That's my job." He stood, collected his folder. "But Mr. Kelly, don't wait too long. Whoever did this once can do it again." After he left, I sat in that hospital bed thinking about coffee. I hadn't made meals I hadn't prepared, and who had access to my kitchen for the past 2 months. The answer made my blood run cold, but it also clarified everything. They'd been inside my house, regularly, with keys I'd given them years ago when family meant something different than it did now. There's a moment when you stop being the person something happens to and become the person who makes things happen. Mine came somewhere between the hospital room and that car seat. They discharged me that afternoon, my second discharge in 3 days. This time I walked out on my own legs, no dizziness, no fever, just clarity sharpened to a cutting edge. Marcel was waiting with his car. We didn't speak until we were away from the hospital, moving through Philadelphia afternoon traffic. Autumn light slanted through the windshield. The city looked the same as it had 4 days ago, but everything had changed. "So I know about the toxin in my blood," I said, breaking the silence. "I know about 14 forged signatures, and I know you've been protecting something since that first night you refused to leave the hospital." Marcel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What do you mean?" "Well, the way you sat in that corner chair. The way you've positioned yourself between me and the door every time someone enters. The way you check your jacket pocket every 15 minutes to make sure something's still there." I turned to look at him. "I've spent 40 years reading structural weakness and knowing what's load-bearing. You've been guarding evidence like your life depends on it. Because it does." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "How did you know about the USB drive? I never mentioned it. Because you're too careful to have sent me that email without keeping copies. And you're too smart to keep digital copies anywhere they could access remotely. Which means physical media probably encrypted, probably backed up in multiple locations. The way you touched that jacket pocket told me which copy you're carrying. Marcel pulled over to the curb and put the car in park. Looked at me with something between respect and relief. Everything's on there, he said quietly. Financial records, forged inspection reports, email chains between your son and my former supervisor, audio recordings I made before they fired me, enough to prove fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to endanger public welfare. And they know you have it, I said. They suspect. They can't prove it. That's why they destroyed my reputation instead of just firing me. They needed to make sure no one would believe me if I tried to come forward. How do you build an alliance with a stranger? You start by admitting you both need what the other one has: evidence and credibility, secrets, and a name that still means something. Here's what I know, I said. You have proof, but no platform. I have credibility, but no evidence. Separately, we're both just damaged men making accusations no one will take seriously. Together, we might actually be able to stop them. What are you proposing? A partnership. You give me access to everything on that drive. I lend you the weight of a name that's been trusted in engineering circles for 4 decades. We build a case so airtight, they can't dismiss it, can't bury it, can't make it disappear. Marcel looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Not the tentative agreement of someone being convinced, but the firm commitment of a soldier who just found his unit. We didn't shake hands, we didn't need to. We both knew what came next, going home to see what else they'd touched, while I was lying in that hospital bed. One question, Marcel said, pulling back into traffic. If they were poisoning you to keep you weak, what were they afraid you'd do if you stayed strong? That was the question that would lead us to everything else. Late Wednesday afternoon, Marcel dropped me at my front door. The answer to his question was waiting inside. The first thing I noticed walking through my front door was that Faye's African violets were still alive. Someone had been watering them while I lay in that hospital bed. I stood in the entryway of my Fishtown Row home afternoon light, slanting through the windows, and let my eyes adjust. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it 8 days ago. Too exactly. Too perfect. Faye's plants sat on the windowsill above the kitchen sink, leaves, green and healthy soil, damp to the touch. She'd kept African violets for 30 years, and I'd maintained her watering schedule after she died. Wednesdays and Saturdays, never more, never less. 7 days in the hospital meant at least 1 watering, possibly 2. Someone had been in my house. Someone who knew Faye's schedule. I moved through the rooms, slowly, my engineer's eye cataloging micro details most people wouldn't notice. The desk in my home office, the second drawer pulled slightly differently, the friction point changed. Someone had gone through my files and tried to put everything back exactly where it was. They were careful. Almost careful enough. The living room showed faint vacuum tracks across the carpet, fresh within the last day or two. A hint of perfume lingered in the air, floral, expensive, not Faye's scent. The kind Nell wore. I sat down in Faye's old armchair, the fabric worn smooth from decades of use, and thought about keys. Grant had a spare set I'd given them to him years ago, when family meant people who helped instead of people who searched your home while you were unconscious. No break-in, no forced entry, no theft. Just systematic examination disguised as care, someone watering plants while searching drawers, leaving everything almost exactly as they'd found it. From today forward, nothing in my life was accidental. Violation. That's the word for what I felt sitting in my own living room. Not anger, yet that would come later. Just the cold recognition that someone who called me family had walked through these rooms searching for something while I was too weak to stop them. I was checking the bedroom closet when headlights swept across the front window. A car door closed. Footsteps on the porch. Grant stood on my doorstep alone. No Nell, no flowers. Just my son, looking 10 years older than he had 3 days ago, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders curved inward. "Dad," he said when I opened the door. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without speaking. He walked past me into the living room, hands in his pockets, not meeting my eyes. The house felt smaller with both of us in it, the silence heavier. He stood by the window for a long moment before turning around. "I came because I need to apologize," he began, voice rough. "For Monday morning. For the way I spoke to you when you called from the hospital. I shouldn't have—" He trailed off, searching for words that wouldn't come. I let the silence stretch, waited, watched him struggle. We weren't really entertaining clients," he said finally quietly. "We were home. Nell said we should let you manage on your own, that you needed to learn independence, that we couldn't keep dropping everything every time you called." Another pause, longer this time. "But that's not the whole truth either." He looked at the floor. "She said we'd talked about this, about boundaries, about not enabling dependency. I didn't remember agreeing to those exact words, but she was so certain, and I thought maybe I'd forgotten the conversation and—" He stopped, took a breath, started again. "I don't know what I'm trying to say." "Let me ask you something," I said calmly. "Were you truly entertaining clients that morning when I called from the hospital?" The question hung in the air between us. Grant opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the door, at the window, at anywhere except my face. 5 seconds of silence. 10, 15, 20. There's a difference between the silence of shame and the silence of fear. Shame looks down. Fear looks behind itself, checking the door, measuring how much time is left before someone notices you're gone. My son was checking the door. "Your silence tells me more than any answer would," I said quietly. Grant's face crumpled slightly, the mask of the successful businessman cracking just enough to show the frightened man beneath. "I don't know what to do anymore, Dad. I don't know how to—" He stopped, couldn't finish, or wouldn't. "How to what?" I prompted gently. "How to fix it," he whispered. "Any of it." I didn't realize until it was too late, and now everything is— Again, he stopped. This time the silence lasted longer, and when he finally looked at me, his eyes were red. "Did you water my plants while I was in the hospital?" I asked. Confusion flickered across his face. "What? No. I didn't. I haven't been inside your house in months." "Someone has," I said. "Someone with a key. Someone who knew Faye's watering schedule and went through my desk drawers and vacuumed the carpet and left everything almost exactly as they found it." Grant went very still. "When?" While I was hospitalized. Probably multiple visits." He sat down heavily on the edge of Faye's armchair, hands clasped between his knees, shoulders curved inward like he was trying to make himself smaller. He looked afraid, not of me, but of something I hadn't seen yet. The silence stretched for a full minute, 2 minutes. I didn't break it, just waited. "She doesn't know I'm here," he finally whispered. "Not Nell doesn't know. Not my wife doesn't know. Just, she's spoken with the kind of careful fear you use when saying someone's name might summon them." "What is she afraid I'll find?" I asked. Grant shook his head, not refusing to answer, but unable to. "I don't know. I swear I don't know. She handles so much of the business now, the contracts, the certifications, the—" He stopped. "I don't even know what I don't know anymore." He stood abruptly, moved toward the door. "I shouldn't have come. If she realizes—" Grant shook, I said. He stopped, hand on the doorknob. "You're my son," I said quietly. "Whatever's happening, whatever you've done or haven't done, you're still my son. Remember that." He nodded once, not turning around, and left. Through the window, I watched him sit in his car for 5 full minutes before starting the engine, checking his phone twice, looking at my front door like he wanted to come back but couldn't. When his taillights finally disappeared around the corner, I stood alone in my living room and understood whatever Nell had done in my house was just the surface. Thursday morning, I discovered what Nell had been building while I lay in that hospital bed. My neighbor, Mrs. Brennan, stopped me on the sidewalk as I retrieved the newspaper. She was a retired school administrator in her early 70s who had lived next door for the past 6 years, the kind of neighbor who always remembered to bring my trash cans up from the curb. This morning, she had the carefully gentle voice people use when they think you are fragile. "Tune Philip," she said, hesitating. "We have all been so worried since we heard about the bridge. That was such a brave thing you did." "Thank you," I said. She shifted her weight, choosing words carefully. "Your daughter-in-law stopped by last week. She mentioned you have been having some trouble since the fever. Memory problems. She said you sometimes mix up your medications." I kept my expression neutral, concerned but not alarmed. "Last week, she mentioned this last week. Yes, before you came home from the hospital. She seemed very concerned. Said you sometimes forget what day it is that she and Grant were worried about you living alone." Mrs. Brennan touched my arm gently. "If you ever need help remembering things or if you need someone to check on you, I am right next door." "That is very kind," I said. "I appreciate your concern." I went inside, closed the door, turned the deadbolt. Stood in the dark hallway with the newspaper still folded under my arm. Last week. While I was still lying in that hospital bed, unable to defend myself or control the narrative, Nell had been here. Talking to Mrs. Brennan, planting seeds, building a story about a confused old man who mixed up medications and forgot what day it was. How many neighbors had she visited? How many carefully concerned conversations had she planted across this block while I was unconscious? I walked through my house with new eyes, seeing it not as my home, but as a crime scene. Evidence of an architecture built around me without my knowledge. This was not anger anymore. Anger is what you feel when someone attacks you once. This was something colder, the recognition that someone had built an entire system designed to make you doubt your own mind. The kitchen showed the clearest evidence. On the refrigerator held by a magnet was a handwritten medication chart. Nell's handwriting, neat and organized. At the top, Dad's medication schedule updated per Dr. Shelton, November 7th. Below, a detailed grid showing 3 medications, dosages, and timing instructions. I pulled the hospital discharge sheet from my jacket pocket and laid both documents side by side on the kitchen table. Medication. A hospital discharge sheet said take with food twice daily. Nell's chart said empty stomach once daily. Medication B hospital said once daily morning. Nell's chart said 3 times daily. Medication C hospital said as needed for pain, maximum 4 hours apart. Nell's chart said every 2 hours regardless of pain level. Every single instruction contradicted the hospital's orders. Everyone designed to look like either I had misunderstood the doctor or was following instructions incorrectly. I called Dr. Shelton's office, asked the receptionist if my daughter-in-law had called to update medication instructions on November 7th. "Let me check," she said. Papers rustling. "No, sir. We have no record of any family member calling for medication updates. All discharge instructions came directly from Dr. Shelton's notes during your checkout." I thanked her and hung up. Nell had told Mrs. Brennan I mixed up medications. Then she had left me instructions specifically designed to make me look confused when I tried to follow them. Instructions she claimed came from my doctor, but never had. I was putting the phone down when I noticed it. Corner of the kitchen mounted high where the wall met the ceiling. Small black camera, no larger than a matchbox. Professional installation angled perfectly to capture the medication cabinet, the refrigerator where the chart hung, and most of the kitchen workspace. A security camera, for my safety presumably, installed while I was hospitalized. I walked closer, studying the angle. The lens captured everything: the pill bottles on the counter, the handwritten chart on the refrigerator, and whoever stood at that counter taking medications. Perfect framing for recording an elderly man following wrong instructions, looking confused, making mistakes. What do you call it? When someone plants cameras in your kitchen to record you following their fake instructions so they can prove you are incompetent. I did not have a legal term for it yet. But I would. I thought about Marcel's email trapped in spam, about 14 forged signatures, about toxin in my bloodstream dosed to keep me weak at a specific time, about Grant's terrified silence, about neighbors prepped with concerned narratives. This was not random cruelty. This was systematic, calculated. Someone had spent months building a framework designed to prove I was incompetent, confused, and unsafe. They had documented my supposed decline while poisoning me to make it real. They had prepared witnesses, manufactured evidence, and installed surveillance to capture the proof they needed. For what? A competency hearing power of attorney. To silence me permanently before I discovered 14 forged inspection reports, with my name certifying dangerous buildings full of elderly people. I stood there looking directly into that camera lens for a long moment, my face carefully neutral. Then I smiled, not a warm smile, the kind of smile you give when you finally understand the rules of a game someone thought you did not know you were playing. She wanted evidence. I would give her evidence, but not the kind she expected. I had spent 40 years as an engineer documenting structural failures and building cases for why bridges should be condemned. I knew how to build documentation, how to gather evidence, how to create an irrefutable record that would stand up under scrutiny. Nell had built her architecture around me. Now I would build mine around her. And unlike her system based on deception, mine would be built on something that could not be argued away: the truth. I turned away from the camera and pulled out my phone. I needed Marcel. And I needed to see what his sister Lavinia had found inside those elder care facilities, the buildings my forged signature had certified as safe when they were anything but. Late Thursday afternoon, Marcel called. His sister wanted to meet. The woman sitting across from Marcel in that cafe had the same exhausted eyes I had seen on my wife's nurses during her final months, the look of someone who watches people suffer and cannot stop it. "This is my sister Lavinia," Marcel said quietly. Lavinia Marsh, 34, worked as a registered nurse at one of the elder care facilities within the fraudulent chain. She had kind eyes that had seen too much and carried her brother's evidence like a sacred trust. She shook my hand with the firm grip of someone who spent their days lifting patients and their nights wondering if they had done enough. We sat at a corner table in a quiet cafe 3 blocks from Temple University Hospital afternoon crowd, providing cover noise. She ordered coffee. She did not drink, hands wrapped around the cup for warmth. "I work at Meadowbrook Manor," she said without preamble. "One of the facilities covered by your forged inspection reports." I nodded, waited. "Fire suppression systems have not worked in 2 years. Staff ratios are half what federal law requires. 1 nurse covering 40 beds on night shift. Residents falling because nobody can respond in time, and management classifies every fall as routine accident instead of staffing negligence." Her voice was steady, clinical, but her hands shook slightly around the coffee cup. "Your name is on the compliance certification that says our facility meets all federal safety standards. It does not. It has not for years." She reached into her bag and placed a small external hard drive on the table between us. Black plastic, no larger than a deck of cards. "My brother gave this to me before they fired him. Documentation of every violation at 14 facilities across 3 counties. He told me to never delete it, to keep adding my own records. I have been documenting for 2 years." I stared at the hard drive. "Incident reports they would not file," she continued. "Photos of broken equipment they claimed was functional. Staff schedules showing illegal ratios. resident complaints that disappeared, death certificates with causes that do not match what I saw. The cafe noise faded to background hum. All I could hear was her quiet, methodical recitation of evidence. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because Marcel said you did not know, that someone stole your name and used it to certify buildings that are killing people. She looked at me directly. I need to know if that is true, if you are a victim or a conspirator. It is true, I said. I have never inspected a single elder care facility. My specialty was bridges and highway infrastructure. 42 years building a reputation someone stole in ink. She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. Then we need each other. You have credibility. I have evidence. Marcel has the financial records. Together we might actually be able to stop this. I picked up the hard drive, felt its weight in my palm. My wife, Faye, I said quietly, spent her last 3 years in an elder care facility. I visited every Wednesday and Saturday. I believed the inspections meant she was safe. Lavinia reached across the table and touched my hand gently. I am sorry. There is a moment in every investigation where you stop being the victim and become the prosecutor. Mine happened somewhere between that cafe table and the PI office door. Friday morning, I sat across from Reginald Travers in his cramped office that smelled like old files and strong coffee. He was 47, ran a small private investigation firm, specializing in corporate fraud, recommended by Dr. Shelton, as someone who knew how to build cases that held up in court. His office was a single room, stacked with case files, a desk lamp providing most of the light papers organized in systems only he understood. He looked like someone who had spent years following money trails through deliberately obscured records. I laid out everything on his desk. Lavinia's hard drive. My toxicology reports showing deliberate poisoning. The list of 14 forged inspection documents bearing my signature. Nurse testimony. Marcel's financial analysis. Travers reviewed each piece methodically, making notes in a worn leather notebook. The silence stretched for 5 full minutes while he read. Dr. Shelton said you needed corporate fraud investigation, he said finally. He did not mention attempted murder, forged federal certifications, and systematic elder care negligence across multiple facilities. I am discovering the scope as I go, I replied. He tapped the hard drive. This alone is enough for state charges. Add in the forged federal safety certifications and you are building something much larger. How large? Well, Mr. Kelly, you are building a federal False Claims Act case. These facilities bill Medicare for services they claim meet federal safety standards. If those certifications are fraudulent, every Medicare payment they received is fraudulent. We are talking about millions in false claims, possibly tens of millions across 14 facilities operating for years. I sat back in my chair processing the scale. When does personal tragedy become systemic crime? When you discover your wife was not the only one. When you realize the forged signature was not about you, it was about thousands of people nobody was protecting. Hachun, do you understand what you are taking on? Travers asked. Cases like this take years. They require cooperation with federal prosecutors, Medicare fraud investigators, state licensing boards. Your family will fight back with everything they have. My family, I said slowly, poisoned me to keep me weak, forged my signature to certify dangerous buildings, built a systematic campaign to have me declared incompetent. I am not taking this on because I want to. I am taking this on because my professional name is the only thing I have left that means something. Travers looked at me for a long moment. Then he opened his laptop. All right, he said. Tell me where to start. We spent 2 hours going through every piece of evidence, building timelines, identifying witnesses, mapping the conspiracy's structure. When we finished, Travers leaned back and said something I had not expected. That this case could take down an entire regional elder care network, expose systematic fraud across multiple states. What started as protecting your name has become something far larger. He was right, and I was going to need a strategy for every piece of evidence, including the USB drive Marcel was still protecting, like his life depended on it. Because in a case this big, sometimes, the most valuable evidence is the bait nobody knows is fake. Friday evening, I returned home with a plan. Marcel arrived an hour later. He plugged his USB drive into my laptop, and we reviewed the files together in the glow of my desk lamp. 2 years of his life preserved in evidence that had cost him everything. I leaned closer to the screen reading. The scope of what Marcel had protected was staggering. This was not just forged signatures. This was comprehensive documentation of a criminal conspiracy involving multiple facilities, systematic fraud, and deliberate endangerment. This file here, Marcel continued, voice tight, is the smoking gun. An email from Nell to facility administrators dated March 2023, 6 months before they destroyed me. Quote, ensure all federal compliance reports show Kelly's signature for maximum credibility. Philip Kelly's reputation in infrastructure inspection provides cover for expedited Medicare approval process. My name, used deliberately. Chosen specifically because 40 years of bridge inspection work meant federal regulators would not question certifications bearing my signature. See, this drive has everything, Marcel said quietly. Financial transfers proving kickbacks, direct orders to falsify safety reports, evidence they targeted you specifically because your reputation made the fraud more believable. This is what they destroyed my life to bury. He sat back in the chair, exhausted. I have been carrying this for 6 months, sleeping with it in my pocket, taking it to that bridge with me because I could not let it disappear even if I did. I was silent for a long moment, looking at the files on my screen. Then I closed the laptop and looked at Marcel. I want her to know you have this. Marcel stared at me. What? I want Nell to know this USB drive exists and that you have been protecting it. That is suicide, Marcel said flatly. They already tried to destroy me for knowing too much. If they find out I have physical evidence. Not suicide, I interrupted. Bait! The room fell quiet, except for the hum of my laptop cooling down and the distant sound of cars passing outside. Explained, Marcel said carefully. But if she believes this USB is the only evidence and hunts for it, she will not notice what Travers is actually building with the copies we already made. Marcel's eyes widened. You copied everything already. Yesterday afternoon, while you were at work. You left the drive with me. Remember, Travers has complete copies of every file. So does Lavinia. So do I, encrypted and backed up in 3 separate locations. The difference between evidence and bait is not what it contains. It is whether your enemy knows you have it. I needed Nell to know about this drive. I needed her to want it badly enough to make mistakes. Petit succès. This USB, I continued, becomes the shiny object I want her chasing while we build the federal case in plain sight. She will focus on stealing or destroying this drive. She will not realize until too late that destroying it accomplishes nothing. Marcel sat forward slowly. You want her to think taking this drive will end the threat. Exactly. She is smart, methodical, controlled. But smart people make mistakes when they think they know where the danger is. If she believes destroying this drive destroys the evidence, she will move against it. And when she moves, well, you will have proof of obstruction, Marcel finished. Additional charges, more witnesses, more mistakes documented. Look, I have spent 40 years inspecting bridges, I said. Looking for stress points, understanding where structures fail when pressure increases. Nell has been building a careful architecture around me, poisoning forged documents, manufactured incompetency. All carefully controlled. I picked up the USB drive from my desk. Now I am going to apply pressure to one specific point and watch her architecture collapse. Marcel leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his exhausted face. You are one dangerous old man. I am an old man protecting his name, I corrected. There is a difference. Is there? Marcel asked. I thought about that. About phase violets watered by someone searching my home. About medication charts designed to make me look confused. About neighbors told I was losing my memory while I lay unconscious. About my wife's final years in a facility that might have been as compromised as Meadowbrook Manor. My wife used to say I built bridges so people could cross safely. Marcel was right, I was building something different now. Not a bridge, a trap door. So the question, Marcel said, is how do we make sure Nell finds out about the drive without making it obvious we want her to know? Leave that to me, I said. I know exactly who to tell, and I know they cannot keep a secret from her if their life depended on it. Marcel understood immediately. Your son, Grant, is afraid of her. That fear makes him loyal in ways love never could. If I tell him about the USB drive, mention it casually, as something I am worried about, something Marcel is protecting. He will tell her within the hour. Marcel finished. Probably less. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Two men who had met on a bridge less than 2 weeks ago, now building something neither of us had planned, but both of us needed. I picked up that small USB drive and held it between my thumb and forefinger, less than an ounce of plastic and circuitry that Marcel had protected, like it was his last breath. Now it was going to be the bait in a trap designed by a man who had spent 4 decades making sure structures held under pressure. The question was not whether Nell would take it. The question was how long until she made her move. She would not wait long. She moved faster than I expected. Monday morning, week 2. I stood at my front window watching my daughter-in-law knock on her 3rd neighbor's door in 5 days. And this time I had a camera of my own pointed at her. Mrs. Brennan on Monday, the Hendersons on Wednesday, now the Kowalskis across the street. Nell was building her incompetency narrative, one concerned conversation at a time, preparing witnesses who would testify that Philip Kelly had been declining for months. I watched her through the window phone and hand recording. She stood on the Kowalskis' porch with perfect posture, concerned expression, carefully calibrated. Mrs. Kowalski nodded sympathetically, touched Nell's arm, glanced toward my house with worry. After Nell left, I went to the kitchen. Time to dismantle the surveillance system she thought I did not know about. The camera came down easily, just a magnetic mount in the corner where wall met ceiling. Small black box, no larger than a matchbook, professional-grade equipment, with local storage backup. I carried it to my desk and connected it to my laptop. The storage drive contained 3 video clips, each carefully edited and labeled. Medication confusion, November 8th. Disorientation, November 9th. Memory lapse, November 10th. I opened the first clip. It showed me standing in front of the open refrigerator, staring inside with apparent confusion for 15 seconds, looking lost, elderly and disoriented, except the timestamp had been edited. The full raw footage showed me standing there reading Nell's medication chart, which I had deliberately held at refrigerator level to ensure the camera caught both me and the falsified instructions simultaneously. Clip 2. Me searching the kitchen counter for my phone while holding it in my left hand. Perfect evidence of memory problems, except the edited version removed 10 seconds at the beginning, showing me actively reading a text message on that phone while my right hand searched for reading glasses. Clip 3. Me taking medications with the wrong timing, looking confused about dosages. Edited to remove the part where I held up Nell's falsified chart to the camera before deliberately following her incorrect instructions while documenting the entire process. She had manufactured every piece of evidence by recording me following her deliberately false instructions, then editing out all context. The clips showed apparent confusion. The raw footage showed systematic entrapment. I did not delete anything. I copied the complete storage drive raw footage and edited clips and sent everything to Travers with detailed notes on timestamp manipulation. Then I carefully reinstalled the camera exactly as I had found it. She wanted a performance I would give her exactly what she expected to see. But now every confused moment she recorded would exist in two versions: her edited fiction and my documented truth. There are many ways to control someone. You can use fear, money, or love. Nell had discovered something more efficient. She simply controlled what her husband was allowed to say and who he was allowed to say it to. I learned what happened Tuesday night from the forensic analysis Travers ran later. But the events themselves unfolded while I slept, unaware my son was trying to reach me. Grant had been working late in his office reviewing contracts when he noticed Nell's laptop still open on the side desk. She usually guarded it carefully, but this time she had left in a hurry, forgot to log out. He had not intended to snoop. He was just going to close the lid. But her email was open on screen, and his own name jumped out at him from the subject line. Building the liability case, Grant Kelly documentation. He sat down slowly and started reading. 17 emails to her personal attorney over 3 months. Comprehensive documentation, building a legal case to shift 100% of criminal liability onto him. Every meeting he had attended logged with dates and witnesses. Every signature he had made on company documents photographed. Every private conversation he thought was between husband and wife recorded, transcribed, filed. The attorney's response in the most recent email. With this documentation, we can demonstrate Mr. Kelly had sole operational control over the inspection fraud scheme. Your role as communications director creates plausible deniability. The forged signatures bear his handwriting analysis markers, not yours. Grant sat frozen in that dark office laptop screen, casting blue light across his face, understanding finally that his wife had been building his prosecution for months. He opened a new email, typed my address with shaking hands. Dad, I need to talk to you. It's important. About Nell and the company. I think I'm in serious trouble. Please call me tomorrow. Grant. He hit send, felt relief wash over him for the first time in weeks. Finally reaching out. Finally asking for help. The email never arrived. How do you trap someone in the digital age? You do not need locked doors. You just need access to their email account and the patience to monitor every word they type. Nell had configured automatic forwarding rules on Grant's account weeks earlier, maybe months. Every message he sent to my address, she saw first. Messages that threatened her control, she deleted. Messages that built her case against him, she saved. That night, she was home in bed, reading on her tablet, when Grant's email appeared in her monitored folder. She read it once, hit delete, cleared the sent folder from his account remotely, rolled over, and went to sleep. Grant sat in his office, believing he had finally broken through, finally warned his father, finally taken the first step toward escape. He did not know his wife had been reading over his shoulder for months. Did not know every attempt to reach me had been intercepted. Did not know he had been writing to his prosecutor every time he thought he was writing to his father. I would not discover any of this until Travers ran forensic analysis on Grant's devices 3 weeks later. By then, so much more would have happened. But that Tuesday night, while my son sat in his dark office feeling hope for the first time in months, I slept in my house 3 miles away, unaware he had tried to warn me, unaware that his wife was monitoring every digital word he typed, unaware that the trap around my family was tightening faster than I had anticipated, and unaware that in 8 days everything would come to a head in a public hearing. that would expose all of us. Wednesday afternoon, while my son's deleted email sat in digital oblivion, Reginald Travers called with the two words that changed the timeline of everything: 10 days. The city council officially scheduled the hearing. He said, without preamble, Friday, November 24th, public testimony regarding elder care facility contracts and safety compliance certifications. I sat down slowly at my kitchen table. That is Thanksgiving weekend. Exactly. Light news cycle. Low public attention. They buried it deliberately. Papers rustled on his end. Contracts finalized 48 hours after the hearing, unless formal legal objection is filed with evidence, which means we need everything bulletproof by that Friday morning. Do we have enough? We need every one of those 10 days, Travers said honestly. Lavinia's documentation is strong. Your toxicology reports are irrefutable. Marcel's financial records show the money trail. But here is the critical piece: FBI is reviewing this under the False Claims Act, but they will not formally intervene without direct witness testimony at that hearing. I was quiet, processing. You are saying my testimony triggers federal investigation. Your sworn testimony in that public hearing becomes the official statement that opens federal criminal proceedings. Medicare fraud, systematic negligence, conspiracy to defraud the government. Everything cascades from your statement under oath that those signatures were forged and those facilities do not meet federal safety standards, which makes my legal competency the most valuable thing you have, Travers finished. If Nell can have you declared incompetent before November 24th, you cannot testify. Your statement becomes inadmissible. The FBI has no trigger for intervention. The contracts get signed. Everything they built stays standing. 10 days. That number sat in my chest, like a countdown clock I could hear ticking with every heartbeat. I used to plan entire bridge inspections in that time, I said quietly. Coordinate teams review structural analysis, file comprehensive reports. This time I need to tear one down instead of building it. Why, and then we better work fast, Travers said. Because she knows the hearing date now too, and she is going to move. He was right. She moved that night. Thursday evening I was sitting in my living room when the local news came on. The anchor, a polished woman in her 40s with practiced empathy, introduced a segment with careful gentleness. Last week, we told you about Philip Kelly, the retired engineer, who saved a stranger on a bridge before collapsing himself. Tonight, another perspective, the family caring for him through difficult transitions. My daughter-in-law appeared on screen, sitting in what looked like a tastefully decorated living room I did not recognize. Professional lighting, tissue box positioned carefully on the coffee table. My father-in-law is a wonderful man, Nell said, voice controlled and trembling just slightly. He spent his career protecting public safety, but since his illness, he sometimes fails to accept his own limitations. The anchor leaned forward sympathetically. What kind of limitations? Memory confusion? Medication errors? He becomes disoriented about what day it is, whether he has eaten, whether he has taken his prescriptions. A pause. A deep breath. It breaks our hearts watching him struggle. That must be incredibly difficult for your family. Nell nodded, reaching for a tissue. The hardest part is that he does not always recognize he needs help. He insists he is fine when clearly he is not. And we are terrified, what if he falls? What if he forgets to eat? What if he takes the wrong medication dose? The anchor's expression shifted to concerned understanding. What can families do in situations like this? We are filing for emergency adult guardianship, Nell said, looking directly into the camera. Not to take anything from him, not to harm him. We do this out of love because sometimes love means protecting people from decisions they can no longer safely make alone. She cried beautifully through the last sentence. Real tears. Perfect timing. The anchor thanked her for her courage in sharing such a personal family struggle. The segment ended with a card showing information about elder care resources. I turned off the television and sat in the darkness. What does it feel like to watch someone destroy your reputation on television while framing it as love? It feels like standing on that bridge again, except this time, I am the one on the railing. She had announced the guardianship filing on live television, in front of thousands of viewers, framed it as family devotion, painful sacrifice, protection born of compassion. Every neighbor who had received her carefully concerned visits would see this broadcast. Every person who would be asked about my competency would remember Nell crying about memory confusion and medication errors, and she had done it 9 days before the hearing. I sat in that dark living room doing the math. Emergency guardianship petitions could be filed and reviewed in as few as 72 hours if a judge deemed the situation urgent. And Nell had just made it look very urgent on live television. The petition would cite concerned neighbors, medication chart errors, video evidence of confusion carefully edited to remove all context, a daughter-in-law weeping about protecting a beloved father-in-law from his own decline. If she could get me declared incompetent before November 24th, I could not testify. My sworn statement, the trigger for federal intervention, would be inadmissible, dismissed as the confused ramblings of an elderly man with documented cognitive decline. Without my testimony, the FBI would not intervene. Without federal investigation, the contracts would be finalized. 14 elder care facilities would continue operating with fraudulent safety certifications. Hundreds of elderly people would remain in buildings I had supposedly inspected and approved, and my name, 42 years of professional integrity, would be permanently attached to systematic fraud I had never known existed. I stood up slowly and walked to the window. The street was quiet. Normal November evening, cars passing, porch lights on, neighbors living their lives. 9 days. Somewhere in this city, Nell was sitting in her own living room, probably reviewing the broadcast recording, checking social media responses, measuring public sentiment, building her case one manufactured piece at a time. And somewhere else, my son was sitting alone, believing his email to me had gone through, waiting for a response that would never come, because his wife had deleted every word. Friday morning, with 8 days until the hearing, Marcel's voice on the phone carried an edge I had not heard since the bridge. There is a 40-second gap in the most important recording we have, and someone tried very hard to erase it. An hour later, he sat at my dining table with Travers' laptop open, audio waveform displayed across the screen like a heartbeat monitor with one flat section where the pulse should have been. This recording, Marcel explained, pointing to the visualization, documents a meeting between Nell and facility administrators at Meadowbrook Manor. Lavinia was present, kept her phone recording in her pocket. But right here, he indicated the gap, 40 seconds of dead air where the most incriminating conversation occurred. Travers leaned forward. Someone deleted it. Attempted to, Marcel corrected. But audio files store metadata. The forensic specialist I know recovered the deleted segment from file fragments. It took him 3 days, but he got it back. He clicked play. Static first. Then Nell's voice, crystal clear, no background noise to obscure a single word. Change line 47 to approved. Remove the fire suppression failure notation entirely. Mark staff ratios compliant even though we both know they are not. The state inspector accepted the last 3 reports without question. Philip Kelly's signature carries weight. They will not challenge. A pause. Someone asking a question I could not hear. Then Nell again. Grant will sign the filing documents because he always does what I tell him. He stopped questioning me 2 years ago. Just make sure the dates match across all facilities. Marcel stopped the playback. The silence in my dining room was absolute. "That is her voice," he said quietly. "Direct orders. Your son's name. She is not just covering up the fraud, she is the architect. He was the pen she controlled." 40 seconds of audio. Less time than it takes to make coffee. Enough time to prove who destroyed dozens of lives and blamed it on my name. "Then this changes everything," Travers said, copying the file to encrypted backup. "This is not accomplice testimony anymore. This is conspiracy with clear hierarchy. Nell as primary actor, Grant as controlled executor." I stared at the frozen waveform on the screen, thinking about my son. About the fear in his eyes when he visited my house. About the way he checked the door like someone might be listening. Before I tell you what my son said to me that Sunday, on a park bench, the conversation that broke something between us, that may never be repaired, I need you to comment A, if you think a father should forgive betrayal, or B, if some things cannot be forgiven. Add one short reason why. Please note the next part includes some recreated details to convey the emotional truth of what happened. Sunday afternoon, Grant called. Asked to meet at the small park 3 blocks from my house. I arrived first, sat on a bench under bare November trees, watched leaves skitter across dead grass. He looked broken when he arrived. Dark circles under his eyes. Unshaven. Shoulders curved inward like he was trying to make himself smaller. He said, sitting down but not looking at me. "Why did you not respond to my email Tuesday? I told you I needed to talk. About Nell. About everything." "What email?" I asked carefully. "I never received anything from you." His face changed, realization spreading like cold water. "She has been reading my emails," he said slowly. "My phone. How long has she been watching everything I do?" "I do not know," I said honestly. "But if that message never reached me, she deleted it before I could see it." Grant put his head in his hands. We sat in silence for a long minute, just the sound of wind moving through empty branches. "Do you know," he asked finally, "about the inspection reports with your name?" "I know my name was signed 14 times by someone else," I replied. "I know those signatures certified buildings that do not meet safety standards. I know elderly people are living in facilities that could kill them." Grant lowered his head. No denial. No explanation. Just silence that confirmed everything. "Did you sign them?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He nodded once. Small movement. Defeated. "Did you know they were forged when you signed?" Another nod. Smaller this time. "There are things you cannot protect your children from. Sometimes the worst thing you can do is try, because it teaches them that consequences are negotiable and accountability is optional." I placed my hand on his shoulder. Felt him tense, then slowly relax. "You were not a bad man from the start, Grant," I said quietly. "But you let someone turn you into one. And now you have to decide, are you going to stay that person, or are you going to become someone different?" He started crying. Not loudly. Just shoulders trembling, silent grief pouring out of someone who had finally understood what he had become. We sat like that for a long time. Father and son on a park bench in November, surrounded by evidence of choices that could not be unmade, and consequences that were coming whether we wanted them or not. "I do not know how to fix this," he whispered finally. "You cannot fix it," I told him. "You can only face it. There is a difference." He wiped his eyes, looked at me directly for the first time since arriving. "What happens now? Now you go home," I said. "You go back to your life, and you decide what kind of man you want to be when this is over." He nodded, stood slowly, walked away without looking back. I watched him get into his car, sit there for 5 minutes, before starting the engine drive away toward the home he shared with the woman who controlled every word he typed and every message he sent. My son sat on that park bench looking smaller than I had ever seen him, not because he had confessed, but because he had finally understood how completely his wife controlled every word he spoke and every message he sent. He was not just complicit, he was trapped. And the saddest part was knowing that even now, even after everything, he would go home to her tonight, because he did not know how to do anything else, which was exactly what I needed him to do, because the trap I had set required him to tell her one very specific lie. Monday morning, I made the phone call that would spring the trap. The lie I needed Grant to tell his wife was simple. Marcel had left something important at my house. A USB drive in my desk drawer. Evidence I was worried about. Something that needed to be secured before the hearing. I kept my voice casual when I called him. Asked how he was doing. Mentioned offhandedly that Marcel had been careless, left his backup drive here when we were reviewing files. Said I was concerned about it sitting in my desk unprotected. Grant's silence on the other end told me everything. He was listening, processing, and he would tell her. Fear made him loyal in ways love never could. "Are you going to be home this week?" he asked carefully. "Doctor appointment Monday afternoon," I said. "But I will be back by evening." I hung up and installed the camera. Not the kitchen camera Nell thought I did not know about. A different system. Professional grade. Hidden in the bookshelf with a view of my entire desk and the study entrance. High definition. Motion activated. Encrypted upload to cloud storage in real time. Then I left for a doctor appointment that did not exist. Drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks away and waited. The camera alert came to my phone at 2:17 p.m. Motion detected. I pulled up the live feed and watched my daughter-in-law let herself into my home with the spare key I had given them 5 years ago, when family still meant something different than it meant now. She moved through my house with casual familiarity. No hesitation. Straight to the study. Straight to the desk. She knew exactly what she was looking for and exactly where I had told Grant it would be. She pulled open the second drawer, saw the USB drive sitting on top of a stack of papers, exactly where I had placed it that morning. She picked it up, examined it, slipped it into her jacket pocket. Then she left. 3 minutes total. Efficient. Professional. The breaking and entering of someone who had done this before. I watched the footage 3 times that evening, sitting in my dark study, seeing her move through my home on the screen. The casual familiarity with which she violated my space. The efficiency of her theft. The complete lack of hesitation or guilt. She did not look around. Did not pause. Did not second guess. Just walked in, took what she came for, walked out. Someone who felt entitled to enter my home without permission. Someone who believed my possessions were hers to take. Someone who had probably been doing exactly this for months, while I lay sick, while I recovered, while I built my case. I forwarded the footage to Travers with a single line. She took the bait. Timestamp shows breaking and entering theft trespassing. Add it to the file. Tuesday morning, Travers called with something else. "Coffee shop near your place," he said. "I have something you need to see in person." He was already there when I arrived, corner table, laptop closed, folder in front of him. He looked like someone who had not slept well. The burner phone," he said, without preamble. "The one that sent the text message to Marcel the morning of your hospital discharge." I sat down slowly. "You traced it. Carrier records and store surveillance. Took some favors, but I got it." He opened the folder. "Phone purchased 3 blocks from your daughter-in-law's office, November 5th, the day before your discharge." He slid a photo across the table. Grainy convenience store surveillance still. A woman at the counter. Dark hair, professional clothes, face partially turned away from camera, but profile visible. Timestamp in corner November 5th, 2023, 3:47 p.m. "That is Nell," I said quietly. Store clerk confirmed the purchase. Burner phone activated, immediately used once the next morning. at 6:43 a.m., then powered down permanently. He pulled out another document. The text message to Marcel, "This is your last chance. If you don't end this today, everyone you care about will know what you did. No more running." I stared at the photo, at the timestamp, at the careful premeditation of someone who bought a phone the day before, using it to push a desperate man towards suicide. Shatuktikum. The morning of your discharge. Travers continued. Marcel received that text at 6:43 a.m. You did not even wake up until 7, did not call home until 9. By the time you were standing on that bridge talking him down, she had already tried to kill him. The coffee shop noise faded to background static. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, steady and cold. Mona, she was not reacting to your interference, I said slowly. She was not responding to Marcel threatening her operation. She tried to kill him before I even got involved. Before you even knew there was a problem. Travers agreed. The timeline is clear. She bought the phone the day before your discharge, sent the suicide text while you were still in the hospital. Marcel went to that bridge because of her message, not because you started investigating. You saved him from something she set in motion. He closed the folder. This is not just fraud and forgery anymore. This is attempted murder, premeditated, documented. She tried to kill Marcel to silence him before you could even learn his name. I sat back in my chair, processing. Nell had not been covering up mistakes or reacting to threats. She had been systematically removing obstacles. Marcel knew too much, so she tried to push him off a bridge. I started asking questions, so she poisoned me. Grant showed signs of wavering, so she built a liability case to frame him. The hearing is Friday, I said. 3 days. Until we have everything, Travers replied. Forged signatures, financial fraud, poisoning, breaking and entering caught on camera, attempted murder via burner phone, and audio of her ordering Grant to falsify reports. The FBI is ready to move the moment you testify. 3 days. I had breaking and entering on video. Attempted murder traced through phone records. A son trapped between loyalty and complicity. A daughter-in-law who had tried to kill a man before I even knew his name. The question was no longer whether I could prove the conspiracy. The question was whether I could survive 3 more days while Nell grew increasingly desperate, knowing her window was closing and her trap was tightening around her instead of me. I walked out of that coffee shop into cold November morning, 3 days from a hearing that would expose everything carrying evidence that could destroy my entire family. And somewhere in this city, Nell was holding a stolen USB drive that contained absolutely nothing, believing she had won. Thursday morning, the day before the hearing, Nell was studying an empty USB drive while I prepared for battle. Marcel arrived at dawn. I watched him walk up my front steps carrying a leather briefcase, looking like a man who had not slept, but had spent the night organizing evidence instead. He spread everything across my dining table like a prosecutor preparing for trial, 40 years of my engineering precision, reduced to 12 manila folders and 1 USB drive that actually contained what Nell thought she had stolen. This is everything, Marcel said quietly, arranging the folders in sequence. Every piece of evidence we have. Complete timeline of the conspiracy from the first forged signature to yesterday's breaking and entering. I stood at the table looking at 12 folders that represented hundreds of hours of investigation. Folder 1, the 14 forged inspection reports bearing my signature. Folder 2, financial records showing kickback payments. Folder 3, the recovered 40-second audio of Nell giving direct criminal orders. Folder 4, my toxicology reports, documenting deliberate poisoning. Each folder told part of a story that, when assembled, revealed systematic fraud, attempted murder conspiracy, and betrayal spanning 2 years. Are you certain about tomorrow? Marcel asked. I spent 40 years building things that stand. I replied, touching the edge of folder 1. Bridges, overpasses, structures people trusted with their lives every day. Today, I tear down what has no right to stand. Just one more day, Marcel said. Then it is over. We spent 3 hours reviewing everything. The financial trail, the facility violations, the timeline showing Nell had tried to kill Marcel before I even knew his name, the camera footage of her breaking into my home. Every piece cross-referenced, documented, ready for presentation. My hands did not shake as I turned the pages. 40 years of bridge inspections taught me to see structural failure before collapse happened. I should have seen this weakness in my own family, the cracks forming the load-bearing relationships, failing the entire structure, becoming unsafe. But I had been looking at the wrong things, trusting the wrong foundations. Marcel left at noon. I ate lunch alone, reviewing notes, preparing for questions I knew would come. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. public testimony. City council chambers. Cameras recording everything. At 2 p.m., someone knocked on my door. A young woman in county uniform stood on my porch clipboard, in hand-efficient professionalism that suggested she delivered documents like this daily without considering their weight. "Philip Kelly," she asked. "Yes." She handed me an envelope. "Emergency petition for immediate review. You are required to review the contents and respond within statutory time frame." She left before I could ask questions. Inside was Nell's final move. Emergency petition for immediate temporary psychiatric commitment. Filed that morning. Hearing requested for Friday at 8 a.m., 1 hour before the competency hearing. The petition cited ongoing delusions, paranoid behavior, danger to self and others. It included edited video clips from the kitchen camera showing apparent confusion, affidavits from neighbors describing concerning behavior, a statement from Nell detailing my supposed mental decline with dates, times, specific incidents. If a judge granted this petition, I would be declared mentally incompetent 1 hour before I was supposed to testify. My statement would be inadmissible. The FBI trigger would fail. Everything I had built would collapse. I called Dr. Shelton. "Shriko, I received your call 10 minutes ago," he said, answering on first ring. "I have been expecting this. Nell's attorney contacted my office this morning requesting my medical records and evaluation notes for emergency competency hearing. Can they do this? They can file it. Whether it succeeds is another question." Papers rustled. "I have evaluated you 3 times since your discharge. My professional medical opinion is that you show no signs of cognitive impairment delusion or diminished capacity. My testimony will end this petition before it begins." "She's trying to silence me before I can speak," I said. "When I know," Dr. Shelton replied, "and I will be there at 8 a.m. to make sure she fails." I hung up and sat in my quiet house emergency petition on the table beside Marcel's 12 folders. Nell had made her final move. Try to have me declared incompetent 1 hour before the hearing. If that failed, she still had her guardianship claim, her edited videos, her prepared narrative about a confused elderly man making false accusations. But she did not know what I had. She did not know about the complete dossier, the unedited footage, the recovered audio, the burner phone trace, the toxicology evidence. She thought she was playing chess while I was barely learning checkers. She did not realize I had been building a case like I built bridges systematically, redundantly, with backup systems for every critical component. The phone rang at 11 p.m. I knew before answering only 2 people would call this late, and Marcel had already said goodnight. That Grant's voice barely a whisper. "I am here," I said. "Are you going to the hearing tomorrow?" "Yes." Long silence. I could hear him breathing, could picture him in some dark room, phone pressed close, speaking low so his wife would not hear. "I want to stand with you," he said finally, "but I do not know if I am brave enough." I stared at the ceiling, thinking about courage. About the 40-second audio recording where Nell said he always did what she told him. About his deleted email trying to warn me. About him sitting on a park bench weeping because he finally understood what he had become. You do not need bravery, I told him quietly. You just need to decide who you are. Courage is not about feeling strong. It is about choosing truth even when you are terrified. Another long silence. I do not know if I can, he whispered. Well, that is your choice to make, I said. But Grant, tomorrow I am going to tell the truth about everything, with or without you. You need to decide if you want to be there when I do. He hung up without saying goodbye. I woke at 5 a.m. Friday morning, November 24th. Brewed coffee in the dark kitchen. Dressed in my one courtroom suit, the one I had worn to Faye's funeral, to Grant's wedding, to every formal occasion where appearance mattered. Looked in the mirror. Saw a 68-year-old man who had been poisoned, betrayed, framed, and systematically attacked by his own family. But also saw someone who had spent 40 years making sure structures held under pressure. Today was not a day for anger. Today was a day for truth. The City Hall Council chamber held 47 people when I walked through the doors at 8:47 a.m., and Nell was already there, front row, smiling. She wore navy professional confident, hair perfect, makeup subtle. The image of a concerned daughter-in-law attending a difficult but necessary hearing about an aging father-in-law who needed protection from his own declining judgment. Marcel sat 3 rows back with Lavinia. Dr. Shelton stood near the wall, medical file under his arm. Reginald Travers occupied a seat near the evidence table, laptop ready. The City Council Chair, Judge Harriman, a gray-haired woman with 30 years of municipal law experience, who ran hearings with no-nonsense efficiency, called the session to order at 9 a.m. sharp. Public hearing regarding safety compliance certifications for elder care facilities under municipal contract, she announced. Mr. Philip Kelly has requested to provide testimony as independent inspection expert. Mr. Kelly, please approach the podium. I walked to the microphone. 47 people watching, cameras recording. My hands steady on the wooden podium. My name appears on 14 safety compliance reports for elder care facility chains operating under city contracts, I said clearly. I have never signed a single one of them. The chamber went absolutely silent. Judge Harriman leaned forward. You are stating under oath that these signatures are forgeries. I am stating that I did not sign them, I replied. My name, my license number, my professional reputation, all used without my knowledge or consent to certify buildings I have never inspected. I saw Nell's fingers tighten around the table edge. Her smile remained perfect. Certifikai, I have documentation. I continued, showing systematic fraud spanning 2 years, forged certifications, falsified safety reports, facilities operating with non-functional fire suppression systems, illegal staff ratios, and structural violations that endanger elderly residents daily. Judge Harriman gestured to Travers. Present your evidence. Travers stood, connected his laptop to the chamber's sound system. This is a 40-second audio recording obtained from internal facility meetings, dated March 2023. He pressed play. Nell's voice filled the chamber crystal clear. You will certify structural compliance on all 14 properties, or I will make certain your contract ends. Philip Kelly's signature provides credibility. Regulators will not question. Grant will sign the filing documents because he always does what I tell him. 47 people heard it. Every word, every inflection, every casual assumption of control. Dr. Shelton approached. Next presented my toxicology reports. Low-dose immunosuppressive compounds administered over extended period, deliberately calculated to incapacitate during specific time frame. This was not illness. This was poisoning. Lavinia testified about facility conditions. Residents falling, Systems failing, reports falsified. Her voice steady, professional, damning. And then the chamber doors opened. Grant walked in holding his phone. He did not look at his wife when he placed it on the council table. He looked at me, and I saw the son I thought I had lost, not found again, but choosing in that moment to become someone different than who he had been. I am surrendering all text logs between my wife and myself, he said, voice shaking but clear. And I wish to confess to forging my father's signature on 14 safety compliance reports under instruction from my wife, Nell Kelly. Nell stood abruptly, her mouth opened. No sound came out. Judge Harriman accepted the phone, marked it as evidence. The council will review these materials. Mr. Kelly, you may return to your seat unless I have more to say, Grant interrupted quietly. My wife built this system. I executed it. But I want the record to show I knew it was wrong. I did it anyway. And I am prepared to face whatever consequences follow. He sat down in the first available chair 3 rows from his wife, as far from her as the chamber allowed. Nell's smile never wavered. She turned toward the cameras as if this were just another press conference she could manage her way through. This is a coordinated conspiracy, she said, voice controlled and precise, orchestrated by my husband and father-in-law who cannot accept that I built something successful. They are attempting to destroy what I have created out of spite and… I have a question, I said, still standing at the podium. Judge Harriman looked at me. Proceed. I looked directly at Nell. If you cared so much for my well-being as you claimed on television last week, why do hospital records state you explicitly refused to sign my discharge papers after 7 days of severe fever? Silence. Judge Harriman. I continued. Temple University Hospital has records showing that on November 3rd, next of kin approval was requested for discharge assistance. The signature line shows refused with timestamp and initials. I would like those records entered into evidence. The judge gestured to the council secretary, a young man in wire-rimmed glasses responsible for reading official documents into the record. He pulled up the hospital database on his tablet, verified the document, and began reading aloud. Patient Discharge Approval Form. Philip Kelly. November 3rd, 2023. Next of kin signature line refused. Timestamp 9:47 a.m. Initials NK. He looked up. The notation states family member declined to provide discharge assistance. Patient released without family support per patient request. 47 people watched Nell sink slowly into her chair. No argument, no explanation. Just official hospital records signed in her own hand, documenting that while she claimed love and concern, she had refused to help when I needed it most. I had not needed to argue, had not needed to accuse. The truth documented and witnessed spoke for itself. Judge Harriman set down her gavel. This council calls a 15-minute recess to review submitted evidence. All parties will remain available for additional questioning. Nell sat in her chair, perfect posture crumbling slightly, while 47 people filed past. Cameras still recording. Her entire architecture of lies unmade not by my accusations, but by her own signed documents, her own recorded voice, her own choices preserved in official records. The council chair called for recess, but outside the chamber doors, 2 county investigators were already waiting with badges visible and questions of their own. The 2 men in dark suits were not journalists. They stood too still, and their eyes tracked only one person as the chamber doors opened. I noticed them immediately. So did Marcel, who touched my arm and nodded toward the hallway. FBI agents, professional stance, badges clipped to belts, waiting. They had been there before the hearing concluded, before the recess was called, before Nell's world collapsed in that council chamber, which meant the federal investigation had been running parallel to everything I had built, triggered the moment I testified under oath, and these agents had listened to every word spoken in that chamber, through whatever legal monitoring they had arranged. Agent Drummond was the lead, a tall black woman from the Philadelphia FBI Field Office Financial Crimes Unit, with 20 years investigating healthcare fraud. She stood with the kind of patient authority that came from building cases that held up in federal court. Beside her, Agent Foster, younger, white, early 30s, methodical demeanor, held a folder and wore an expression of someone who had memorized every detail of the arrest warrant he was about to execute. Nell walked out of the chamber with her head-high posture perfect, still performing composure, even as her entire architecture crumbled. Agent Drummond stepped forward, badge visible. "Nell Kelly." Nell stopped. "Yes, I am Special Agent Drummond, FBI Financial Crimes Unit. You are under arrest for conspiracy to defraud the United States under the False Claims Act, wire fraud, tampering with medication, and obstruction of justice." The hallway went quiet. People filing out of the chamber stopped, turned, watched. Agent Drummond continued, voice steady and official. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." Nell's composure finally cracked. "You cannot do this. I have rights. I have lawyers. This is... You have lawyers." Agent Drummond agreed calmly. "And you should contact them immediately. But right now you are under arrest, and you will be taken into federal custody." Agent Foster produced handcuffs with practiced efficiency. Grant emerged from the chamber behind his wife, saw the agents, saw the badges, saw what was happening. His face went pale. "So Mr. Grant Kelly Zutti," Agent Foster said, turning to him. "Yes," Grant managed. "Say, you will face separate prosecution for your role in this conspiracy. However, your voluntary testimony and cooperation today will be noted in our report and communicated to federal prosecutors. I recommend you secure legal counsel immediately." Grant's hands shook as Agent Foster explained his legal exposure. He did not look at his wife. He looked at the floor like a child waiting for judgment. "Do you understand?" Agent Foster asked. Grant nodded. "I understand." Agent Drummond moved to handcuff Nell, who started to pull away, started to protest, started to perform the outrage of someone wrongly accused. But the handcuffs closed with a metallic click that echoed in the marble hallway, and Nell stopped struggling. Just stopped. As if the sound of metal on her wrists was the first thing in 3 weeks she could not manage away, could not spin, could not control. She stood very still, hands cuffed behind her back, perfect posture finally breaking as her shoulders curved inward. Cameras kept recording. Elodie Lockwood's crew had followed the crowd into the hallway, capturing everything: the arrest, the charges, the moment Nell Kelly's carefully constructed empire collapsed into federal custody. I stood against the wall, watching. Not celebrating, not gloating. Just watching the consequence of choices made 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 3 weeks ago, catching up with someone who thought they were too smart to be caught. "We will transport you to federal holding for processing," Agent Drummond said to Nell. "Your attorney can meet you there." Nell finally looked up, saw the cameras, saw the crowd, saw her husband standing 10 feet away with empty hands and red eyes. "Grant," she said, voice breaking for the first time. Not a command, a plea. "Grant, call Morrison. Tell him what happened. Tell him they are making a mistake. Tell him..." Grant did not move, did not speak. Just stood there looking at the floor, hands, shaking shoulders, trembling. "Grant," Nell said again, more urgent. "You need to help me. We are in this together. We..." "No," Grant said quietly. "We are not." That was all. 2 words. But they carried the weight of every choice he had made in that council chamber, every text log he had surrendered, every forged signature he had confessed to. Nell stared at him, opened her mouth, closed it. Understanding finally that the husband she had controlled for years had made a choice she could not reverse. Agent Drummond and Agent Foster led Nell down the hallway toward the service elevator. Cameras followed. People watched. The woman who had built a systematic fraud operation, who had poisoned her father-in-law, who had tried to push a desperate man off a bridge, walked away in handcuffs, while the world recorded every step. I did not watch her leave. I looked at my son, standing alone against the wall with red eyes and empty hands. Looked at the boy I had raised, the man who had betrayed me, the person who had finally too late but finally chosen truth over loyalty to someone who had never deserved it. Our eyes met across the hallway, 10 feet between us. 40 years of history. 3 weeks of systematic revelation, and one choice that had cost him everything. I gave him one subtle nod. Not forgiveness, not absolution. Just acknowledgement that in that council chamber, when it mattered most, he had told the truth. Grant's face crumpled slightly. Relief or grief or both. He nodded back, barely perceptible, then looked away. They led Nell down the hallway while cameras kept recording. And for the first time in months, Grant looked like the boy I once knew, not because I forgave him, but because he had finally stopped being the man his wife had made him. But redemption is not the same as reconciliation, and the road between us remained longer than one nod could bridge. 3 hours after they led Nell away in handcuffs, I walked out of City Hall into cold November light. Victory, I discovered, made no sound. It was just 4 people standing in a parking lot under gray sky with nothing left to fight. Marcel saw me first and pushed away from his car. Lavinia stood beside him. Dr. Shelton waited near the parking meter medical file still tucked under his arm. Few words were needed. We had spent weeks building the case, hours presenting it, minutes watching it succeed. Now we stood in silence, because nothing left to say mattered more than what we had already done. Marcel extended his hand. I shook it, a firm grip between 2 men who had survived something neither had chosen, but both had finished. "We did it," he said quietly. "You did it," I corrected. "You saved the evidence. You kept fighting when they destroyed everything you had." But even as I said it, I felt the hollowness. We had won. Nell was arrested. 14 facilities would face federal review. Justice had been served, and I had torn down my own family to achieve it. Dr. Shelton reported that the city council had suspended all elder care contracts pending federal review. Lavinia confirmed federal inspectors had already contacted Meadowbrook, full audit Monday morning. "Good," I said, meaning it. That is what matters, not what happened to my family. What happens to the people in those buildings. One by one, they walked to their cars and drove away. I stood alone in that parking lot, looking up at gray November sky, thinking about Faye, about what she used to say in her final years. The best thing a man can do is build things that stand after he is gone. I had spent 40 years building bridges. Now I had torn one down. I was not sure yet which action would define me. 2 weeks passed, like water through hands. Then I drove to the detention center on a cold Tuesday in early December, signed in at the front desk, and waited in the visitation room while Detention Officer Hayes explained the rules and pointed me to a station. Grant appeared behind the glass partition 5 minutes later. He looked older. Not just tired, older. As if consequence had weight that finally showed on his face, in the lines around his eyes, in the way he moved like someone carrying something they could not put down. We picked up phones on opposite sides of the partition. "Dad," he said. "Grant." Silence for a long moment, just us looking at each other through reinforced glass, in a room designed for conversations between people who had lost the privilege of sitting together. He told me he was cooperating fully with prosecutors. Maybe 3 years instead of 10. Maybe less. Then his voice broke. Dad, I need to know, can you forgive me? I reached into my jacket and pulled out the photograph I had brought. Grant as a child, maybe 7 years old, sitting on my shoulders at some park I could no longer remember. Both of us laughing at something long forgotten. I pressed it against the glass. Grant stared at it. His eyes filled. I can forgive you as your father, I said. But you must face consequences as a man. Those are two different things and both are necessary. Forgiveness does not erase what happened, I continued. It does not restore what was lost. It just means I choose not to let your choices destroy both of us. Grant nodded, unable to speak. Then before I could stand to leave, he placed his hand flat against the glass partition, palm open, pressed against the barrier between us. I looked at his hand, at the glass, at the distance that was less than an inch, but felt like miles. And I placed my hand on my side, matching his palm to palm, with only that barrier between us. We stayed like that in silence. Two hands pressed against opposite sides of glass, a childhood photograph between them, and years of rebuilding ahead if we chose to walk that road. I am sorry, Grant whispered, for all of it. I know, I replied. And someday that might be enough. But today, it is just the beginning. I stood left, the photograph pressed against the glass, and walked away. Behind me, Grant pressed his palm harder against the partition, staring at two people who had once been happy together, both laughing at something neither of them could remember anymore. I walked out into December, cold, and sat in my car for 5 minutes before starting the engine. My phone rang as I pulled onto the street. Marcel's voice on the phone sounded lighter, carrying a hopefulness I had not heard in months. He had news, a job as peer counselor at a suicide prevention organization. Would I come see his new office? I drove there mid-December, 3 weeks after the hearing. The man who nearly died on a bridge in November was hanging motivational posters in a counseling office 3 weeks later. Proof that rescue changes both people involved. His office was small, housed in a modest building near Temple University. One desk, 2 chairs, a bookshelf half filled with crisis intervention resources, windows that welcomed afternoon light. Marcel was hanging framed photographs when I arrived, bridges from around the world. Golden Gate, Brooklyn, Tower Bridge, and one photograph of the pedestrian span over the Schuylkill where we had met. Reminders, he said when he caught me looking, that bridges connect things, and that sometimes the most important crossing is the one from despair to purpose. His first client had called the crisis line at 2 a.m, a young woman 23 convinced nobody understood her. Marcel talked with her for 90 minutes, sharing his own story, listening to hers. She agreed to see a therapist by morning. She texted me yesterday, he said quietly. Said she went to the appointment. Said it helped. Said thank you for staying on the phone. We sat in the afternoon light, and I asked the question that had been building since I saw those photographs. Do you regret it that morning on the bridge? Marcel was quiet, looking at his hands. Then he looked up. No, because if not for that day, I would not know why I needed to live. My life had not ended when they destroyed my career. It had changed into something I did not recognize yet. You gave me time to see the difference. Faye had said something similar in her final years. That sometimes life does not end when you expect it to, and the hardest part is learning to inhabit the version of yourself you never planned for. That you gave me something too, I said. A reason to keep fighting when I had none left. Marcel smiled, small, genuine. Then we are even. I left at dusk, walking to my car through December cold, and realized for the first time since Faye passed that darkness was not something to fear. Just evening. Just the natural rhythm of days ending and beginning again. Late December. Snow falling in silence over Philadelphia. I sat in my living room holding lukewarm coffee surrounded by Faye's books, her armchair, our wedding photo on the mantel. 2 months since the bridge. 7 weeks since the hearing. How many second chances does one man get? I opened my laptop and navigated to my email. Typed Grant's address. Wrote one line, "I will visit you on Friday." Pressed send. Watched it leave my outbox. Made certain this time no spam filter, no barrier between my words and my son. Snow covered Philadelphia in white silence outside my window. Faye once said snow makes everything look cleaner than it really is. She was right. It never erased the dirt beneath, never fixed the cracks in concrete. Just covered them temporarily until the thaw revealed everything again. But sometimes that was enough. Sometimes we needed those brief illusions of peace to remember what we were working toward, to catch our breath before continuing the actual work of repair. I picked up our wedding photo from the mantel. Looked at two people who had no idea what 40 years would bring. Then I set it carefully back and walked away. Tomorrow I would visit Grant. We would sit on opposite sides of glass phones pressed to ears, building something from ruins. It would take years, perhaps a lifetime. Perhaps it would never fully heal, but tonight I had sent an email. Tonight Marcel was helping someone who called at 2 a.m. Tonight federal inspectors were reviewing facilities, making them safer. Tonight my name still meant something because I had fought to protect it. Snow kept falling. The house was quiet. And for the first time in months, I thought I might actually sleep without nightmares. I returned to the bridge on a Tuesday morning in late January, 53 days after Marcel saved my life by letting me save his first. The pedestrian span over the Schuylkill looks different in winter light. Frost clings to the railings where my hands gripped cold metal on that November evening, my phone battery blinking its final warning, a stranger standing too close to the edge. Commuters pass without looking at me, their breath fogging in air that carries cold river water and diesel exhaust. I stand exactly where Marcel stood. 22 feet from the west, anchor point 17 from the east. I measured it later from news footage that turned my private moment of decency into a public spectacle, one that exposed my family and paradoxically saved my freedom. I spent 40 years building bridges, calculating load distribution, designing redundancies, ensuring structures could bear weights their creators never anticipated. I never understood that the bridge mattering most would not be one I engineered, but one I crossed without thinking when a stranger needed someone to stay. A new metal plaque catches the morning light. It reads, "In memory of Faye Ann Kelly, who believed in structures that connect." Marcel arranged it. His handwritten card said simply, "Your wife understood bridges better than either of us." This seemed right. I trace her name with fingers that still shake residual neuropathy from the antimony poisoning that nearly erased me from the world, while I obsessed over blueprints and the exact angle of light through hospital windows. The tremor may fade, or it may not. Either way, it reminds me how close I came to disappearing. The prosecution rests its case next month. Nell faces 23 federal counts: elder abuse, wire fraud, attempted murder. The evidence is overwhelming. Travers estimates 15 to 20 years minimum. I should feel triumph. Instead, I feel tired. Grant texts every morning now. Short messages, nothing that acknowledges the enormity of what happened or the 40 years of distance between us. This morning at 6:47, Friday visits extended to 3 hours. "You still coming?" I replied, "Yes. Bringing the photo albums you asked about." 3 dots appeared, then vanished. But the raid receipt confirmed 6:51 a.m. He saw it. That means something. Marcel meets me for coffee every Wednesday near his new office at the Philadelphia Youth Crisis Center, where he counsels teenagers who stand too close to edges. Last week, he told me about a 16-year-old named Dante, brilliant, isolated, convinced the world would be better without him. I told him about the bridge, Marcel said. About you stopping when you had every reason not to. About how one stranger paying attention can change everything. Did it help? I asked. He came back for his second appointment. That is how it starts. The wind cuts through my coat. I should leave attorney meeting at 11. Civil suit discussions, the legal architecture of reclaiming a stolen life. But I stay gripping cold metal, finally understanding something I could not articulate before now. I did not win because I was smarter or braver or better prepared. I won because on one unremarkable evening, when no cameras were watching and nothing was keeping score, I stopped for a stranger who needed someone to stay. That single, unmeasured choice set everything in motion. Marcel's gratitude, Elodie's footage, Lavinia's courage, the entire unraveling of a conspiracy I was too close to see. Faye once told me that bridges only matter if people cross them, that engineering without human purpose is just mathematics pretending to matter. I finally understand what she meant. I walk away into January fog. Behind me, morning traffic crosses the span where 2 lives intersected forever. Ahead, a son waiting for photo albums, a rescued man building purpose from despair, and a 68-year-old engineer who now knows the difference between structures that stand and structures that connect. The bridge remains, and so do I. And to you listening to my story, remember this: sometimes the smallest choices we make when no one is watching become the ones that save us. For 42 years, I built bridges while neglecting the ones at home. I missed my son's transformation. I ignored the warning signs when my daughter-in-law isolated me after my wife died. Don't make my mistake. Family justice isn't about revenge. It's about staying present enough to see the truth before it's too late. The lesson isn't that good deeds are rewarded with fairy tales. My son is in detention. My daughter-in-law faces prison. But I'm alive because one November evening I stopped for a stranger on a bridge. I believe God put Marcel in my path for reasons I couldn't see. Real family justice doesn't come from elaborate revenge plans. It comes from showing up for truth even when exhausted. These dad's revenge stories aren't about winning. They're about refusing to let cruelty have the final word. If this resonated with you, leave a comment. Does family justice truly exist, or is it just a word we use to make sense of pain? Share this with someone who needs it. If you believe dad's revenge stories like this matter, subscribe to Wise Revenge so we can continue these conversations together. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time means more than you know. Final note: while this story is based on real experiences, certain details were adjusted for privacy and storytelling. The message about attention, presence, and choosing truth is what I hope stays with you.